Well, we're going to begin a unit on climate change. On a personal note, I first became aware of climate change as an issue back in 1989, 1990. I had a Christian ethics professor at the seminary where I attended, and he taught us about the ecological damage that was happening to the earth and our moral responsibility to be concerned and to do something about it. And that included his understanding of climate change all those many years ago. The sad thing is that industries, including the oil industry and automotive industry, have been aware of the impact of fossil fuels and CO2 in our environment for over 50 years, and we haven't done anything about it. And when I think of this earth and the beauty that it has and how much I have benefited from it and enjoy it, I wonder if my generation and generations before us can begin to hold ourselves accountable for giving you and future generations this same earth. At the moment, though, it seems like we're reluctant to take care of the earth for a variety of reasons. I think one of those biggest reasons is simply greed. But I go back to the first creation story in the book of Genesis. And when I read that story, I realize that creation is a gift, at least from my understanding, a gift from God. And like any gift, it is something that we welcome into our lives. The giver has given us this beautiful world. And it's a shame that we treat it the way that we do. I'm big on looking at natural beauty. And my heart almost beats a skip when I see how wonderful the vistas are in this area and in other places where I've traveled. And I just hate to think that my children and possibly grandchildren and you and others may inhabit an inhospitable planet that would lead to the breakdown not only of our ecology, but also civilization and maybe even the future of humanity. And I don't think that's using scare tactics at all. I think that's a call to reality that we are sowing the seeds of our own destruction. And why don't we just behold the beauty around us and seek to preserve it so that it can be enjoyed by generation after generation. Here's a view of the New River just down the road from Oak Hill Academy. And I've actually been at that farm that's pictured there, and I've been up on that hill, and I've actually seen this particular view with my own eyes. You at this moment at a school, you live in a beautiful area. Just get outside and look at it. But there is real devastation that is happening because of climate change. You know about the melting glaciers, the devastation it's bringing to the animal life that lives in both the Antarctica and the Arctic, the calving off of large pieces of ice. You see the shrinking of the Greenland ice sheet, and it shrunk even more than that in 2020. The massive ice at our poles. So this is part of the refrigeration system of the Earth. If you don't know anything about it, it's time to learn. But those ice sheets are necessary for the type of life that we have enjoyed for the last several hundred years to continue. These are satellite pictures of the shrinking ice. And right now, I just read in the news the other day that the Arctic Sea has not yet started to ice over like it normally does, which is alarming to climate scientists. Coastal cities are already beginning to bear the threat of rising sea levels. Miami is already making plans to deal with climate change. A graphic look at what happens if all the ice melts and the predictions of where the coastlines would go. This is a typical graph you'll see. Normally Our temperature does go up and down, but it's cyclical. There's a predictable cycle to it. As you can see, since the 1900s, we have what's now called a hockey stick effect. That rather than going up and down along some lines of variables that we're aware of, there's been a dramatic rise since the beginning of the industrial age. And we can measure CO2 parts per million by drilling down in ice, which captures the CO2. The other thing is, as the ice melts, it also begins to release a lot of that captured CO2, which adds to the atmosphere and increases the rate of climate change. It affects the migration of animals, bird species, and other animals. Here you see the changing migration patterns. Well, it affects a lot of things. As heat goes up, you have respiratory diseases and infectious diseases like we're experiencing now that have better climates, ironically, to spread because of warmer temperatures. Civil conflict will occur as people are being displaced by climate change. We've had a record number of hurricanes this year attributed to climate change. Air pollutants, food supplies will be disruptive, etc. You talk about a domino effect. This has a cascading domino effect in many areas. Future of farming, right now we produce tremendous amounts of food for large numbers of people, but as climate change occurs, and it is occurring, farming patterns will change. You also have a higher level of pests and other diseases that begin to encroach in areas where they once were not. There's a list of some of the effects of climate change. We're seeing the effects of climate change in the West with the wildfires that have been in California and Colorado this year. Species are threatened. Humanity lives sort of in a bubble. We think that we're not affected by the species around us. Well, we're part of the food chain. If you remember anything from your early sciences in the 9th or 10th grade, you realize that we live in a web that's interconnected. And when we begin to break down that web, we begin to break down humanity's ability to feed ourselves and to survive in an environment that has been fractured by our existence and our activities. Recycling can help, but it's only one small part. Look at how our pollutants, especially plastic, have affected large swaths of our ocean. There's not a place on Earth now that has not been affected by the pollution of human beings. And that pollution affects the whole web of our existence. There's a picture of just all of humanity's plastic waste gathering in oceans, threatening species of fish and other wildlife. Alternative energy sources, yeah, we can argue about those, and we should. It's a negotiating process. We're not sure which is the best way to go. Each of these has its downfalls and its problems. One of the burgeoning places of research is with hydrogen energy. There's a lot of people doing a lot of work trying to figure out which one of these is best, and maybe none of them are best. Maybe it's a combination of all the above. I don't know, but I do know that CO2, the use of carbon-based fuels, has got us to a place where we're seeing such a threat to our climate that we're going to have to stop using these type of CO2 resources. I know that one of the local groups, Habitat for Humanity, in Ashe County builds houses for people, and when they do, they're using geothermal as a way of heating and cooling the houses. That's where you just use the natural temperature of the earth to cool or heat water. And you've got a stable temperature that comes from a certain depth in the earth, and you use that and you pump it through the house to both heat and cool houses. It's a very neat way to do houses. It's just not applicable for large complexes like apartments, I guess, and major urban areas. Elon Musk, he's trying in his own way. And of course, we can debate what are his motivations and how well he's doing, but he has definitely changed the conversation about cars. There's a lot of people working on various types of electric cars. And again, we have to consider the environmental impact of electric cars and batteries. Are there other methods? Elon Musk says that car manufacturers don't care if they run on batteries or if they run on fossil fuel. They just want to sell cars. And a lot of car manufacturers are finally trying to make a change to electric cars and electric motorcycles and also electric semi-trucks. For you and I think this is a good quote. Either we can watch it happen or we can be part of it. And I think it's necessary for us to be part of it in the way that we conduct our lives. Best case scenario is we can continue to postpone climate change and at least make some inroads, or we can just throw up our hands and watch civilization collapse. And there's an estimate on electric vehicles. Well, what I have is a series of readings that I will give you. Some of them are quite lengthy. And from my perspective, this is the most important ethical dilemma facing humanity. All other dilemmas pale in comparison, in my estimation, to climate change. And I've been thinking about this for the last 30 years. In fact, it so bothered me in 1989 that I had a conversation with my newlywed wife. Is one of the reasons I didn't want to have children was because of my fears of climate change. I did choose to have 2 daughters, and I'm still uncertain if that was a good choice because I'm uncertain about what their future will look like. And I'm uncertain what yours will as well. Thank you.